Why is it in this era of photorealistic games where developers focus on all these intricate details, can we not have grounded, well-written relationships? By and large, relationship writing and mechanics hasn't advanced significantly in the past few decades, aside from a few exceptions. And the more you think about this, the more egregious an issue it becomes. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Wait a minute, Pancake Sean. X game has great relationship mechanics. I should probably tell you about it in the comments. Hold that thought for just 1 second. Because despite there being some great exceptions, I think this is a really big issue, and the more we delve into the poor writing and mechanics of relationships in video games, the more you're going to find that this is ruining some fantastic titles. This might be a minor annoyance to you or something you've never thought of, but once we actually dig into it and examine it, you're going to see it in every title you play, and it's going to really dampen some otherwise great experiences. Let's start with the most egregious issue first. Everybody watching this was a teenager at one point. In fact, some of you might be teenagers right now. To that, I'd like to say, who put me on TikTok? Who's stealing my content? Stop watching short form content. It's ruining your brain. I'm on YouTube. When you're a teenager, one of the most dominating forces in your life is sex. Now, this makes complete sense. My boy Chucky D wrote all about this in The Origin of Species. But basically, he said that for any species to survive, it needs to multiply. So it only makes sense that once you reach adolescence, your brain is just filled with sex, 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 sex. It's just raw human nature. Or as the church I grew up in would say, a horrible sin you have to repress. I'm sorry, I'm having natural urges that every single species in history has had. Please forgive me, Mr. Jesus. The problem is, in a lot of video games starring young people, they're just these weird asexual beings who couldn't care less for this very natural carnal urge. Like, you'll have an RPG where everyone is built like a runway model and they all dress like this, but nobody seems to really care. You're telling me that you have a bunch of teenagers and early 20-somethings going on an adventure, and not once, once did someone so much as glance at Lulu's giant Lulus? I've been fixated on them for years. Look at something like Final Fantasy 15, and you can see why the omission of any sort of lewdness is kind of weird. So you got four young Calvin Klein models going on a road trip, and the main guy is engaged to a princess way out of his league. And you're telling me that not once through this entire road trip did these guys ever try to chase tail or even talk about plowing? And I'm not talking about the plowing in Stardew Valley. This game takes nearly 100 hours to beat, and you're telling me that these perfect specimens of manliness didn't ever get horned up while they're on the road and take a chance with some lot lizards? You're telling me that they didn't talk to the main character about how he's gonna pork the beautiful princess? It's just kind of weird, because that's things that young men would do, and the fact that they're not in the game is just odd. Even Conan O'Brien, who isn't a gamer, can see that that omission makes for a very weird atmosphere in the game.
They're extending the exhibit for Lady Lunafreya's wedding dress.
Could that be the dress we read about in the papers?
Wait, they read about a dress?
Yep, that's what guys like to do when they're on their own.
Love to go check out the dress.
Let's go check out that dress we read about in the papers. Oh my God.
And don't go telling me it might be because one or two of the characters could be gay. That's totally fine. Gay people have a libido too. These twinks should be just as horned up as everybody else. The setup to this situation, 4 young guys on a road trip, calls for there to be some sexual element to it. It doesn't have to be overt, it doesn't have to be lewd, but the fact that these guys would be talking about mature things in this situation, and they're never mentioning it throughout the entire game, just makes the entire situation and all the characters seem kind of stilted and weird. When you start to think about this weird blank spot in games like Final Fantasy 15, you realize that it's prevalent in other games as well and is detrimental to the stories those games are trying to tell. You think of games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy or Pokemon. Yeah, Pokemon. You're telling me that people live in a world full of monsters that look like this, and not once has someone tried to it. If you go on the worst parts of the internet, you can find real world people who would love to have relations with these fake Pokemon. I mean, look at this picture I found right here. Oh, So obviously the reason for this in those last 3 instances are that those games are geared towards children, and little Jimmy doesn't need to see 16-bit Locke and Celeste going at it on the family room CRT TV. And honestly, that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about here. Any game that's made for children needs to remove mature elements to protect their audience. I'm not some sort of crazed sex fiend that thinks mature elements need to be in every single game. Still though, there's some games out there that are marketed towards young people, especially teenagers, that could at least allude to mature themes that are natural to the story without losing their E or T rating. In Sea of Stars, you have a young male protagonist and a young female protagonist, and they go into this sanctuary where they're the only 2 young people together for like 10 years. And through this whole time, the young male protagonist doesn't even burn a CD of pop songs about love to the young female protagonist because he's cringy and awkward. Carly, if you're watching this, I am so sorry I gave you that CD on the bus freshman year of high school. This is real. To this day, I still cannot listen to Are You Gonna Be My Girl by Jet without cringing so hard. I was such a weird kid. I never thought. I think it would be totally fair in Sea of Stars if there was an element of maturity or attraction there, even if it was just a passing comment or something that ended up with the characters being in a platonic relationship. I mean, there's plenty of games and shows and books that are geared towards children that have characters who are attracted to one another. Good writing can veil very mature and realistic themes in an otherwise child-friendly story in a way that allows older viewers to recognize it while younger viewers remain oblivious. True story. My wife and I were just watching Inside Out 2 with my daughter, and in that movie they have this scene.
Big weekend for us. What do you want to do?
Well, we could finally clean out the garage, or actually...
Now, my 5-year-old didn't laugh at this scene and remained oblivious to the mature elements, but you can bet your ass my wife and I were cracking up. Look at that man's face. That's a man who was ready to go and then he got shot down. I've been there. But even in games that are geared towards adults, relationships are still written in this weird alien sort of way. And I'm not talking about aliens like the race of sexy blue space lesbians in Mass Effect. It's stupid enough when you have a system where giving a character enough gifts makes them fall in love with you. But that's actually not the worst offender. In so many games, romance is this kind of weird binary thing where someone either loves you completely or they don't care for you at all. In a lot of RPGs, you're presented with this like basket of emotionally unstable characters and you just pluck out the one that you want to have sex with and you act as their emotional support pillow for a few dozen hours, and then suddenly you plow and they love you forever. It's this weird sort of white knight power fantasy that is just completely contrary to how normal, healthy relationships work. At best, it's bad writing, and at worst, it instills in the player this notion that a healthy relationship exists when one person completely changes who they are and what they want for the benefit of the other person. This is especially ridiculous in games where all the characters are throwing themselves at you. Look, Baldur's Gate 3, one of the best games of all time, and my girl Shadowheart, she's my bae, okay? Nobody hurt her. But let's look at the entire arc of Shadowheart's relationship with the player and see if this sounds like something that's healthy. You rescue Shadowheart from a near-death experience and learn that she's a sexy badass who basically worships Satan. Her entire character's identity is built around her religion and her duties towards that religion. After clicking the right responses for 60 hours, you show her that worshiping Satan and being a big meanie isn't really cool. She then renounces literally her entire identity, from her religion to her duties to her reason for adventuring, just because you showed her the way. You then walk away forever in love, and nobody ever thinks this is kind of weird and maybe unhealthy. That's not romance, that's Stockholm Syndrome. And yes, I know that Shadowheart was indoctrinated when she was young and she was lied to, and you help her get through that. But still, this is that sort of weird white knight writing that is prevalent in so many RPGs. And yes, I know that Lae'zel's romance is way better written, but she's a scary goblin lady who spits on me whenever I go near her, and I'm not into that.
Source of my bruises.
Or am I? It's like video games have these two weird extremes. On the one end, you have these ripped asexual teenagers who just don't care about romance or very natural urges that they should be feeling. Then on the other hand, you have the horniest people ever orgying themselves across the land and contorting themselves to whatever the player wants. None of this makes any sense. Real world relationships, and well-written relationships for that matter, are often way deeper than this trite bullshit. Sometimes you have a physical attraction to someone only to find that you don't really have anything in common. Or maybe there's someone that you have a lot in common with, but the spark just isn't there. Or maybe you're in a relationship, but there's a lot of factors that prevent the relationship from blooming, and even though you want to continue the relationship, it's not going to work out. But in video games, every single character will want to slob on your knob regardless of the circumstances. You just give them the right presents and let them cry on your shoulder enough, and then guess what? You're in love forever. Also, relationships have ebbs and flows. There's good times and there's bad times. And you can't expect someone to change themselves completely for your benefit. Your partner won't conform to what you want 100% of the time. That's just unhealthy. Or as the manosphere would say, that's what women should do, man! They should listen to me! I fucking love the UFC! But in video games, all these characters with distinct needs and motives go along with whatever the player wants romantically 99% of the time. Oh, look at this. There's a totally unique character right here who magically loves you because you gave them a fish every day for 2 years. Great job! That being said, there are some exceptions to this norm, and whenever I see a well-written, grounded relationship in a game, I can't help but smile. When Arthur Morgan meets up with Mary Linton in Red Dead Redemption 2, it's clear that they have an affectionate shared history, and they would love to reignite what they had, but unfortunately, there's external factors pulling them in different directions. In The Witcher 3, Geralt and Yennefer have this on-again, off-again sort of relationship that is a little bit strained, and with Triss in the mix, it kind of makes a love triangle where nobody really knows how to articulate what they want or find what they want. It's clear that between Geralt and Yennefer, what started off as a magic-induced tryst has evolved into something where both of them are struggling to find out if they should be together or how they should articulate their feelings for one another. In Dragon Age Origins, if you romance Morrigan and you try to wife her up at the end of the game, there's nothing you can do to convince her to stay by your side. She has her own agency and her own motivations for leaving you, and regardless of what you, the player, want, you can't convince her to stay with you. To the Moon is a highly realistic love story full of regret and loss and longing and so many different emotions wrapped up into about 3 hours. Despite its short length, the romance portrayed there is so much deeper and more impactful than that seen in 20 or 50 or 100-hour RPGs. But for every game that does it right, there are so many games that do it wrong. I'm not some sort of weird sex fiend here, okay? I don't think we need to have mature things in every single game. Sponsors, if you want to invest, I'm not a sex pervert, okay? I'll do an ad read. It's fine. I'm not a sex fiend. Oh God, this isn't good. The Pokemon part went too far. I see that now. The Pokemon part went too far. The sponsors jumped ship. They jumped ship after the Pokemon part. I'm just saying the space between nothing and everything should be explored a little bit more. I mean, in this day and age when we have such realistic games, why can't we write more grounded, realistic romances? We have games with stories where there's alien tadpoles in your head, and if you don't get it out, you'll blow up into this squid monster. Or there's a bunch of high school kids who have to go to this weird psychedelic alternate reality to steal the hearts of bad people and make them good people in real life. These are awesome, fantastic stories, but why is it romance is just this one-dimensional thing where you give people presents or have them contort themselves into a totally different person to basically love you forever. I think that's a load of horse. In this day and age, we should expect developers to challenge themselves when it comes to writing romance in games. Instead, we have to have these weird systems where you press the right button and then watch two character models awkwardly flop on top of one another. It's like, yay, you win! That's what sex is! I think one of the most well-written relationships I've ever seen portrayed in a game comes from Final Fantasy X. Yes, that's the Final Fantasy with that laughing scene. Just bear with me for a second. Throughout the entirety of this game, we see Titus and Yuna go from acquaintances to lovers, and the way this relationship evolves is just so well written. Titus is a bit of a cut-up, and he can make Yuna laugh, and Yuna doesn't really realize she needs this. She's in this dire life or death situation on this adventure, and everyone's super serious around her. But when Titus comes in and he makes her feel joy and elation, even during these dark times, she starts to get attracted to him. Hey, pro tip to all my fours out there, making a woman laugh is a very good thing. You see, when a woman laughs, she closes her eyes, so that means she's spending less time looking at that thing you call a face. Also, when a woman laughs, it's oh my god, I can't include that in the video. When Yuna conforms to the path before her, Titus offers a hopeful alternative, and he turns from this funny distraction into someone who really inspires hope within her. Eventually, Yuna realizes that while Titus is a little bit immature, he's a good person, and he legitimately cares for her. He's the first person in a long time to look at her as more than just a tool to help the world, and he sees her as a person with fears and desires and needs of her own. Towards the end, they realize that they can't escape their fate and that their time together is going to be short and the ending they want for their lives is not going to happen. They realize that it's ridiculous and illogical to fall in love, but despite all the sorrow of their circumstance, their love blossoms. That's some Shakespeare right there. Look, this is beautiful. They know they can't be together, but they still want to be together, man. And then you got that music as a that is beautiful. You watch that when you're 11 years old, it changes you. We never had a scene where Titus gives Yuna 8,000 power spheres in order to maximize her heart level. Instead, we get to see this beautiful relationship through ebbs and flows, and we get to see love grow amidst all this sorrow, and it's just so good. Believe it or not, this is actually the second best video game romance of all time. My personal favorite goes to my boy Clyde from Final Fantasy 16. You see, Clyde hasn't seen his half-sister in like 10 or 15 years. So then he's in a barn alone with her, and he starts to go full Alabama with his intrusive thoughts. Check it out, I laughed my ass off. This is the actual scene.
I'm sorry.
Ooh, Clyde, you got some naughty thoughts. I take back everything I've said about bad writing for romance. A horny teenager being stuck in a barn with his estranged half-sister and wondering if he should go for it is the most realistic thing I've ever seen in my life. Good job, Square Enix. You did great on this one. Okay, I'm just joking about that. I'm not a pervert. I'm just saying in this video that storytelling in games has advanced significantly, and it's fantastic to see the stories that are being told to players. But romance and sex and the writing associated with that is still this weird juvenile thing. And when you have great writing in most of your game, but you have piss poor writing for those elements, it kind of shatters the illusion of the world that these people are trying to build. It's like if you're admiring the artistry that's masterfully on display for a giant painting, and then you realize that the artist has scrawled like a really poorly drawn set of genitals on the painting, and it kind of makes the entire work lesser for it. Does anyone get what I'm talking about here? If you've stuck around this long, go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think, and a like and subscribe will go a very long way. This channel is just a one-man operation, and normally I have monthly videos that devolve into strange old man yells about niche things in video games. So if that's something you like, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you in a month. Thanks. Bye.